Welcome to Buckeyes Tomorrow Morning for Sunday, February 11th. I'm your host, Tom Orr. The Akron game is in 202 days. The game against Michigan in 293 days. Today we are talking about new Ohio State offensive coordinator Chip Kelly. Very familiar name for a lot of people, but someone whose offense and offensive mind and offensive views have changed quite a bit since the last time you were probably watching Chip Kelly on a regular basis. So we're going to be taking a look at what Chip Kelly will bring to Ohio State and the differences between Chip Kelly and Bill O'Brien and all of that kind of fun stuff with our good buddy Ross Fulton of BuckeyeHuddle.com. And every time Ross is on, of course, we are sponsored by Jeff Ruby's Steakhouse of Columbus, proudly offering nationally acclaimed USDA prime steaks, seafood and sushi, impeccable service, live entertainment, and an attention to detail that is simply unmatched. I'm going to use my attention to detail to point out that, guess what? Valentine's Day is 3 days away, so if you have not made your reservations at Jeff Ruby's Steakhouse, I would recommend you do that pretty darn soon. You can do that at jeffruby.com/Columbus. Right now, you can even pause the podcast if you want to do that. But then once you're done making your reservations at Jeff Ruby, we're going to be talking to Ross. Ross, let's start with just Bill O'Brien versus Chip Kelly. We just did a bunch of shows. We did a couple shows on the Bill O'Brien offense and what Bill O'Brien was going to bring to Ohio State, and then he brought it for about 2 weeks, and now we got to have another conversation. So Bill O'Brien versus Chip Kelly, is this wildly different? Is this a much better fit for Ohio State? Is this a much worse fit for Ohio State? Where do you see those two guys?
Yeah, scheme-wise, it's a more natural fit. I think Ryan Day said on his press conference this week something along the lines of like, we're going to run the Ohio State offense, and Bill O'Brien was going to bring elements to it. But there's a lot more overlap between what Ryan Day and Chip Kelly have done in their careers. Obviously, Ryan Day worked for Chip Kelly in the NFL. Than is not. The passing game, at least at a conceptual level, is the same. Same spread run concepts, same use of tempo. I think when we talked about Bill O'Brien, it was like, bringing an adult into the room, a lot of like administrating and having an experienced hand. You obviously have that with Chip Kelly, but you have I think, a much better scheme fit and really someone who can, like, to me, what Ohio State's been lacking, like, he brings. So that's the key thing to me on offense.
So what does he do well? If you're looking at Chip Kelly and saying, okay, he's really going to help us with our, is it the downhill running game? Is it the, passing game? Where does Chip Kelly where do his strengths really lie in terms of being an offensive play caller?
Yeah, and for those who are interested, like, check out Chris Osgood on Twitter, or X, I guess if it's called now. And he's done scheme X's and O's stuff about UCLA football. So lots of good Chip Kelly stuff through that. But as like another good follow on Twitter, Chris Brown from Smart Football said, like, I mean, Chip Kelly's real strength is in the run game. Like, I would say I've looked longingly at the amount of run game diversity that UCLA has used these past few years under Chip Kelly. I think my hope, and probably others' hope, when Justin Frye was hired, was that he was going to bring that with him to Ohio State. We talked about it. We saw a little bit of it this year, but I would say it was certainly in fits and starts. But Chip Kelly, like, what he's done in the run game, particularly like post NFL, like NFL got a little stale. He got a little too basic. Some of the problems Ohio State's had, but he's just doing a ton of stuff at UCLA with, yes, zone concepts and counter, but also like a lot of pin and pull, a lot of formation use. Like, you'll see him run a lot of like pin and pull or counter plays where he's like bringing a receiver in tight, and then the receiver is functioning as one of the pullers. And so are like unbalanced, multiple tight end sets. So like really playing with the numbers and each side of the number line. So you definitely see like Emeka Egbuka in that role, like functioning, like coming in tight as a lead blocker, like as the second puller, so you get, like, as I said, a lot of pin and pull, you get trap concepts, you get wham, wind back. So just a much more diverse run game. As Chris B. Brown also said, like, I would say Chip's like probably his principal failing in the NFL, and like still has always been an issue, is like the passing game isn't super precise. And like a little basic because there's so much focus on the run game. But like, guess what? Like, that's Ryan Day's strength, right? So you're putting together, I would think, like Ryan Day's strength in the pass game, ideally with Chip Kelly's strength in the run game, and hopefully you're getting the best of both worlds. Because as I said, conceptually they use the same pass concepts. It's just that I think Day brings like a level of like NFL precision to it, whereas like what they really have needed is to improve the run game. And, you know, they have two really good backs heading into next year. So there's a lot of different things they can do with it.
I think when people hear the name Chip Kelly, they think, oh, it's the cute little spread offense with the little running. Oh, look at how fast LaMichael James is and the Anthony Thomas. And, you know, they're wearing their cute little gimmicky uniforms and they're running the blur offense and all that kind of stuff. That's not really what he's doing anymore, right? I mean, this is kind of a different. How different is what he's doing now compared to what he was doing then? Because I think that's people in their heads are still thinking that's what he's running. And it's like, well, not completely.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's still like a spread run attack, right? Like they'll get under center, do a little bit of one back stuff. There's some pistol, but a lot of shotgun. It's different in the sense of like, you know, football adapts, right? And so like, we went from being more spread out to now things like people are realizing the advantage of numbers in the run game and blocking. So you're getting a lot more, as I said, a lot more like use of like two tight ends from him, or like unbalanced, or as I said, like, you know, in theory being in 11 or 12 personnel, but then like bringing multiple wide receivers in tight, and suddenly you're in a heavy package. So, you know, somewhat has more the look of like what Michigan had been doing under Jim Harbaugh, where like, yes, you're in the shotgun, but you're like getting like 6 and 7 man surfaces to run the football, or pulling guards and tackles or tight ends or receivers to get like more numbers to one side. And, you know, you do still see, he certainly still incorporates like the Q run aspects of it, or like the bubble reliefs. You know, I think Day also indicated during his press conference earlier this week that like he wanted to get back to that and having that threat at least to help the run game. So like you still get that, but it's just much more reliant on heavier personnel, and I'd say more even diversified run game than what he should at Oregon. Like a lot more pulling, a lot more trapping, and so like, you know, going beyond just sort of like the zone read concepts.
You mentioned earlier that, of course, he did work with Justin Frye at UCLA. Right before Justin Frye came to Ohio State, he was Chip Kelly's offensive line coach at UCLA. So is that something that provides an advantage, that these guys sort of have this shared history? And, you know, not that Chip Kelly needs a Ryan Day translator or anything like that, but those three guys, the offensive coordinator, the offensive line coach, and the head coach, they've all worked together in various combinations at times in the past. Is that something that makes a big difference, or not really?
No, I mean, it certainly helps. I think it particularly, again, like, I think that you have in my envisioning of this, like, right, like Chip's biggest contribution will be to the run game. And I think that obviously that involves a lot of the offensive line and the offensive line coach. So to the extent they're on the same page, and, you know, if perhaps Justin, I mean, it's not going to be anything new to Justin Frye, right? Like he was using these concepts when he was at UCLA in terms of teaching the offensive line. So I do, and I presume that he's on board with, you know, moving the run game beyond being quite so outside zone heavy, mid zone heavy. So I think that it certainly provides a benefit. As I said, like that's why, to me, at least from a scheme perspective, this makes more sense than Bill O'Brien, because like you got a lot of alignment here between the head coach, the offensive coordinator, and the offensive line coach.
So in that way, it maybe makes a little more sense than the Bill O'Brien move did. But there's another way in which it probably solves one of the big issues that Bill O'Brien was also brought in to solve, which is you kind of need the grown up in the room. You need the veteran guy up in the box to call the offense. You know, who is the new Kevin Wilson? Well, it feels like Chip Kelly definitely fills that role every bit as well as Bill O'Brien did.
Yeah, I would think so. I mean, different personalities, obviously. So maybe like different tact. You know, one thing that's just jumped out to me, I think that probably most of us can relate to, is like, it'll be interesting to see how Ryan Day and Chip Kelly work together. Like you go from being someone's, you know, you work for someone to becoming their boss. Like that's a different dynamic than, you know, for instance, Ryan Day and Bill O'Brien, who had not worked together before, right? So they didn't have that like past shared experience. So that will obviously maybe, maybe it'll work great. Maybe it'll take some adjustments from both of them. I'm sure, it seems to me like Chip Kelly's going to be happy to get back to just like getting to focus on scheme and offense and not having to worry about recruiting and NIL and boosters and all the sort of the things that go with being a college football head coach in 2024. So I think, he'll be happy about that. And as I said, I think ideally it's a collaborative effort where, Chip's contributing to Ryan Day's run game and Ryan Day's contributing to Chip's passing game, and they can make it all mesh together.
Yeah, the last time that Chip Kelly was not the head coach of a football team, that he was on the coaching staff for, was 2008. The year after that, he went from offensive coordinator to head coach at Oregon. So yes, it has been a hot minute since Chip Kelly was reporting to anyone, other than an athletic director or a general manager or president of football in the NFL level. Earlier in the week, Ryan Day at the press conference talked about how Bill O'Brien had brought in, sort of audited essentially their system and audited, given his thoughts on like, hey, why do you do this? Why do you call this? Why do you, what kind of value does that bring? Is that a significant thing, or is that just one of those things coaches do to sort of fill some time during the offseason? And how might Chip Kelly build off of what Bill O'Brien did?
Yeah, I mean, that'll be interesting, right? Because like, what if any fingerprints does Bill O'Brien leave in terms of his recommendations and thoughts with Ryan Day? And, and maybe even more so, like in the pass game, like we talked about some of those things, like from his like sort of West Coast lineage in terms of like quick game stuff and the like. But again, like the nice thing with Bill O'Brien was going to have to learn like Ryan Day's terminology and lineage, and Chip Kelly, like maybe some of the terminology has diverged in the last few years. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if like when Ryan Day and Kevin Wilson came to Ohio State, they picked up using a bunch of Urban Meyer's terminology. And so they might, but like, again, their passing games, like Chip Kelly basically like, has taken some air raid concepts, some like Coryell concepts. Like Ryan Day and Chip Kelly's passing game is basically conceptually the same. Like a lot of snag, Y cross, 4 verticals. They use the reliefs. They have the same sort of pots built in. There's just a lot of overlap there. So you have someone who, you lost a month, right? Essentially with Bill O'Brien, but like the good news is like you're sort of picking up already running. And so again, and then I think it comes down to like a lot of like what's Chip Kelly, going to add. And then you obviously have like the flavor of like, beyond the scheme itself, like, what do you call in the moment on 2nd and 6? And, how does that mesh together? Like everyone has their preferences, but like, I do think that both O'Brien and Chip Kelly show that like, I think Ryan Day is aware that like the run game has not been where it needs to be consistently. And like, they need to get some fresh ideas on it, some fresh ways to do it. And just like, because I just think it has been too inconsistent and just not reliable enough. And, I think that goes from everything from, as I said, like diversifying the concepts to having at least a semblance of a quarterback run threat. So like when you do run a read play, like the defense has to account for that. And then, Chip Kelly has always been great at like reading different players. So now like a defensive tackle might be unblocked. It's because they're reading him. And so he's very good at sort of like playing those different chords. Whereas, as I said, I thought Ohio State's run game can get a little stale at times.
Well, a new offensive coordinator, potentially a reshaped run game, a whole bunch of new players of some note, a whole bunch of familiar old players of some note. It is going to be a football season I think a lot of people in Columbus are pretty darn excited about. And we're going to be following it all at BuckeyeHuddle.com. We have a couple interview sessions, we hope, coming up. We've been told maybe we're going to get some assistant coaches, maybe get the true freshmen as well. Some very, very interesting players and very, very interesting names among those groups, both of those groups. Spring football starting in less than a month. Boy, oh boy, some interesting stuff happening on the recruiting trail as well. Maybe some stuff in the transfer portal. It would be a great time to become a member of BuckeyeHuddle.com. That's where Tony, Kevin, and I cover the team. Mark covers recruiting. Ross and Justin and Mickey and Devin all covering X's and O's, making you a smarter football fan on the Huddle board, presented by Jeff Ruby Steakhouse. And of course, Jeff Ruby Steakhouse The award-winning upscale steakhouse in downtown Columbus, named one of the top 50 steakhouses in America by Food Network. Go to jeffruby.com/Columbus to make a reservation today. That will do it for today. Thank you guys all for joining us. Have a great day. We will talk to you tomorrow.